Guys, we're still in 3.7. I'm on page 302, and now we're going to switch gears. So we've talked a whole bunch about how we can use factoring to solve quadratics, but some quadratics cannot be factored, and so now we're going to talk about some other ways you can do this. So one other way to solve a quadratic is with a property known as the square root property. So to kind of motivate the idea behind this, I want to start by thinking about what are all the solutions to x squared equals 9. So what do you square to get 9? Well, you might think right away, maybe you think 3, right? Because 3 times 3 equals 9. But what else? There is something else, right? So actually, the other thing that would work would be if you plugged in negative 3, because negative 3 times negative 3 also equals 9. So this positive negative relationship kind of hints at what the square root property is. So now let me just show you. So the square root property says, so if you have some expression p squared equals k, so that would be exactly like what we have here. So x squared equals 9. So now p can be an expression and k can be a number. So to solve this, what you're going to do is you're going to break this into two parts. So you're going to take the square root of each side. And so p will either equal the positive square root of k or the negative square root of k. So it's probably best if I just show you a couple of examples. So here for example 11. So if I'm straight up using the square root property for x squared equals 25, I want to show you how this works. So I've got x squared equals 25. Now what I want to do is I want to take the square root of each side. But when I take this square root, this side will be plus or minus. That's kind of the big thing to keep in mind here. So my solutions will be plus or minus 5 because the square root of 25 is 5. So you have two solutions, x equals 5 or x equals negative 5. So you do want to break these out as two separate solutions. Now, this makes even more sense if I just kind of change this up a little bit. So before I had x squared equals 25. Now I have x plus 3 squared equals 25. So to solve this, we're still going to do the same thing. So I've got this x plus 3, all of that squared, equals 25. So take the square root of each side, but remember, you're going to have the plus or minus here. Now check out what happens. So now I'm going to have x plus 3. So when I take the square root of something squared, that effectively just kind of cancels out the square. So this will just be x plus 3, so x plus 3. And then this will equal plus or minus 5. So now what I have to do actually is break this into two cases. I'm going to break this into x plus 3 equals 5 or x plus 3 equals negative 5. So that's what it means to break this into plus or minus 5, right? So now I just have to finish solving by just doing what I would normally do to solve for x. So I get the solution x equals 2, and then the other solution I would get would be x equals negative 8. So these would be the two solutions then to this quadratic here. And it is quadratic also because it's got the square there. Okay, so for the next part of this, for C, so now what I want to point out to you is just something very specific about the square root property. Notice that the thing that is being squared, when you look at the square root property, it says that that has to be isolated. So I bring that up because when you look at this example, here's my thing that's being squared, but it's not isolated, right? There's this plus 2 over here. So what you have to do first then is you want to get rid of that 2. So let's go ahead and just subtract the 2 from each side. So now that I get 2x minus 4 squared, now this will equal 4. Now I would recommend that you pause the video here and go ahead and use the square root property. Hit play when you're ready. So I'll go ahead and I'll take the square root of each side, so this will be plus or minus. So I have 2x minus 4 equals positive 2, square root of 4 is 2, sorry. Or the other case will be 2x minus 4 equals negative 2. So now let's solve each of those. So I'll go ahead and add 4 to each side, so I get 2x equals 6. Divide each side by 2, I get x equals 3. I'll pull that down just a little bit just to make sure you can see it. And then for this other one, so now I'll go ahead and add 4 to each side. So I get 2x equals 2. Divide each side by 2, I get x equals 1. So there are my two solutions, 3 and 1. So this is one method you can use for solving quadratics. Now I want to show you one last way. The last way is known as the quadratic formula. So the quadratic formula is this. And so basically what you do is you take an equation of the form, so this is kind of the key right here. ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So this is kind of the general way that we think about quadratics. So you find the number that's in the a spot, the b spot, and the c spot, and after you've identified those, you plug those into this formula here. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to find the x-intercepts of this. So what I need to do actually is I need to set this guy equal to 0, right? This is the equation that we're trying to solve. So what I want to do is I want to see if the quadratic formula can help me figure out what these intercepts are here. So by looking at this, I can kind of approximate what they look like, but I want to make them more exact by using the quadratic formula. So first things first, compare this to this. What's in the a spot? My a would be 1, right? This would just be an invisible 1x squared. What's in the b spot? My b would be 3, and in the c spot, that would be 1. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to plug these in order in this formula. So I would recommend that you pause the video and just try to plug these in and then hit play when you want to just double check how you plugged everything in. So if I'm trying to solve this, so I've got this in the form that I need. So this is going to be -3 plus or minus the square root of 3 squared minus 4 times 1 times 1, all of that divided by 2 times 1. So that's what everything looks like when you plug it in. So now let's go through and actually work this out. So this is going to be -3 plus or minus. Well, now I've got to use the order of operations. So this square root, we're going to pretend like it's almost like a set of parentheses. So I'm going to work on the stuff that's just underneath this radical for right now. So I need to start with the squared part. So what is 3 squared? 3 squared is 9. And then what is 4 times 1 times 1? That's just 4. So this leaves me with -3 plus or minus the square root of 9 minus 4. And then all of this over, well, what is 2 times 1? That's just 2. So take a moment and just make sure that you agree with all these steps and that these look good to you before you move on. So now, as I continue on here, so this is going to be x equals -3 plus or minus the square root of 5, all of this divided by 2. So now I have to break this up into 2 pieces, and this is where this can get a little bit tricky and you're going to need a calculator. So first I need to calculate -3 plus the square root of 5 divided by 2. And then I also need to calculate -3 minus the square root of 5 divided by 2. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'll give myself just a little bit more room. So what I would recommend with doing is just plug in the top part into your calculator at first. So I'll do that with you. So if I just do -3 plus the square root of 5, this gives me -0.7639, and then I need to divide that by 2. And if I divide that by 2, I'm getting x equals -0.3819. We'll round that up to 7. Okay, so that's the first part. So now let's do the other one. So for this other one, if I do -3 minus the square root of 5, so I get that that top part will be -5.236, and then I need to divide all that by 2. So if I divide that by 2, I get x equals -2.618. Okay, now let's remind ourselves what were we even trying to do here. So these are my 2 solutions to this thing here. Now think about this for a second. This doesn't factor, right? There are no 2 things that multiply to 1 that would add to 3, so this actually won't factor. So this is why we're getting these crazy decimals. It's because this thing doesn't factor nicely. Now, if you look at this graph, if you had to make estimates for about where these x-intercepts are, so this one here, if you actually try to count this out, I think you can convince yourself that this would be about -0.38. So that would be this x-intercept here. So we found one of them, so there's that connection. And then for the other one, here's my other x-intercept. So it's somewhere between, it's a little bit closer to 3 than -3 than it is to -2. So there's my other x-intercept. So again, it makes sense then, and it kind of checks out that we get this is the x-intercept. So those 2 things are all connected. Okay, So in the next video, what we're going to do on the next few pages is just do some examples now with that. So if you feel like you've got this and you want to skip those, that's fine. I would recommend still trying to watch the last page videos. But otherwise, if you want to practice this more, I'll see you in the next video.